Hello and welcome to episode 14. In this episode I'm going to continue building Airfix's new 24 scale Bf109G-5. In this episode we're going to cover off all of the build steps, get the construction done, maybe get a little bit of painting done, and get the model ready for its final paint job. So let's kick off. Firstly, I'm just going to have a look at there's some slight mould seam running down the sides of the fuselage. This is where they've slide moulded those fuselage halves. That does need to be addressed. It's pretty simple, just a quick sand. I just use an old 400 grit God hand sanding sponge and just start off by removing that seam. Then move up to 1000 and then wet sand just to really make sure there's no swirl marks and scratches and so on in the plastic. This Airfix plastic sands really quite nicely, but you certainly do need to be careful so as not to leave any scratches and that sort of stuff, because it will show up in the paint. I just find it does. So, and a quick buff with an old bit of kitchen paper just to check that that's all gone. Now in doing so, you can see I've removed those panel lines there, but look, sometimes it does just affect the rivet detail. So I just go back with a pin in a pin vise and just restore that rivet detail. It doesn't take long, and it's really hard to do with an optivisor on around the canopy, around the tripod. And then finally, I give it a buff with some Infinity polishing paper or sandpaper. This is 2500 grit, and it's wild. It really polishes up the plastic and removes any last of the swirls. While I'm feeling sandy, I'll address the seams along the leading edge of the wings. Look, the fit wasn't amazing here, to be perfectly honest, so I really made sure that they got a good sand to ensure that there was no gaps or seams or anything like that. Moving on to the tail surfaces, the horizontal stabilizer parts, I guess, are handed, so left to right, port and starboard, which is really great. You can't get it in the wrong spot. And they're a really tight friction fit. I actually removed a little bit of material just to make sure that they would go in and not force any other parts apart. I don't like that super tight friction fit necessarily, although it does mean that the parts are perfectly horizontal, which is fantastic. So a little bit of liquid glue just to ensure that they're in there. Once that's in, you can then fit the control surfaces on the tail. It's a one piece and they're posable, and it actually calls out in the instructions the limit of travel for those parts. Then the tail section can be glued in, and that the vertical tail section, and that actually traps your control surfaces there. And look, it looks a bit weird right now as you're gluing the parts in, but it does I guess make for a fully posable tail surface area, which is pretty cool. So lots of glue in that join, and then a good squeeze just to get that bead of molten gluey plastic out the front for cleanup later on. And there's a slight gap there. There is meant to be a panel line there, which is cool, so just plenty of liquid glue, make sure it's all fits, and then I'll address that later with Mr. Surfacer. And then we have the actual rudder. Again, it's posable, which is pretty fantastic. It just glues in. With careful application of glue, it is movable, although I will glue it in position. And I just want the vertical and horizontal tail surfaces, or the rudder if you like, and the horizontal control surfaces to be slightly deflected. Just it adds a little touch of something interesting to the tail. While we're still talking about sanding stuff, I really love these Display sanding plates. They're aluminium, I guess just plates really, and with some self-adhesive tape, sanding tape if you like, on there. They are brilliant for sanding and polishing and keeping everything nice and straight and square. You can see here on the trailing edge of the I guess the outer edge of the wing, there's a lot of CA I've had to use to fill the gap that's in the trailing edge there. That's a bit of a letdown of the kit, and so I'm using these Display sanding plates just to really blend in that super glue filler that I've used. And they're really effective for in this situation for removing the CA glue. And look, I finished that up with, again, the polish with the old worn 400 grit God hand sponge. I'm doing the leading edge of the wing. And again, using the Display plates to sand the antenna plate cover over. So this aircraft that I'm doing doesn't have the moraine antenna. So the kit comes with a blanking plate. So I've just filled the gaps in with CA. because it is a blank section of wing there, and just polishing the resultant area with various grades of God hand and display sanders, just to make sure that, again, there's no scratches, everything's polished and clean, and that plate effectively disappears into the plastic. So you can just see the outline of CA there. And then again, a quick polish with some kitchen paper, and it's virtually gone. A few scratches to get rid of, but not too bad. And just what you need, some more sanding. I'm just going to remove the Tamiya grey putty. It's now dried and cured from the sill area around the cockpit edge. Just using those sanding sticks again. Just make sure there's no residue of putty. It does it really well. We can glue in now in the undercarriage, the main gear struts, if you like, just the stubs. These glue in really, really positively. Lots of sort of structural work under there. A very strong assembly for that landing gear, which is good at this stage. And while we've got the glue out, I think we can glue the wings to the fuselage. So that's all sanded smooth, which is looking great. So on the underside of the cockpit area, these squares, and they are the locating points for the wing spar. And they slot straight in there, glue straight in there. And for this, for I guess of extra strength, I'm going to use Tamiya Orange Cap. This glue is just a little bit stronger, I guess. It takes a little bit longer to dry, but it does result in a really strong bond. It doesn't flash off like the Tamiya super thin glues tend to do. And I must say that the fit of the wing to fuselage is out of this world. Sort of Qatari level quality fit. Really, they've done a super job. And just back that join up with some Tamiya super thin just to run it through all of the gaps and joins. Just make sure everything is really in there. Tons of glue. Nice big arrow there to ensure that you got the wings on the right way. Geez, you'd have made a real blunder if you got them the wrong way. And then just to wick some glue into the wing root area. It's pretty simple, and I just push fit just to make sure there's no gaps there. I'll catch it later on, any gaps with Mr. Surfacer, but just it's good to make sure it's all glued in place properly to begin with. Same on the outside of the wing root as well. I like to glue as much of the model together as I sort of can before applying the camouflage. And that goes for all the control surfaces, so all the ailerons and flaps and so on the main wings get glued on, and the fit here is pretty precise, which is lovely. There's a bit of glue, it's all good. Same with the leading edge slats. I'm showing them deployed or out, so they just get glued in as well. I can paint in behind there pretty simply once the camouflage is on, although quite often the camouflage did continue into the exposed area. Some little pieces like the antenna mounting point. It's a porcelain or Bakelite type fitting that the antenna on the spine mounts to, so that just glues straight in after drilling out the location points. And I'll add the antenna almost last because it's quite a delicate piece, which is no point in adding it now because I would just break it off. The propellers need a bit of a sand, so there's an insert in the back of the propeller that just saves the propeller having a sink mark, which is really well done. So that just gets a bit of a sand. Again with a 400 grit, so much sanding. Then the propeller boss can be glued together. It's two halves, and that's the tube for the cannon gets glued in, and then the propeller boss can be glued to the prop hub, if you like. So many words. Now I'm rummaging around looking for, there we go, the little gear section that glues on the back of the propeller hub. You can't see any of this, so it's really great that Airfix have included it. You can't see any of that. And I'm just going to glue the spinner together. It's made up of a bunch of parts, which is really nice. Some beautiful rivet detail on there. And I figure once the actual blades are in, you're not going to see any of the hub detail. And it is important that you get the gun tube centered in that hole there. So a little bit of glue, pivot it around. And we can test fit the prop blades as well, just to see how these look. There you go. Looks fantastic. So while I'm in the gluing mood, there's so much gluing in this thing, I'm going to glue in the intermediate bulkhead. So this has already been painted, it's got a coat of RLM02 on there. It all still comes apart, but this bulkhead section needs to go in before I can glue in the belly plate, because it all locks in quite positively and quite cleverly. So the belly plate can go in, just a little bit of glue, just make sure everything fits perfectly, which it does, and everything is squeezed together. And the whole rest of the belly plate can go in. You can see that's one big plate, and the fit is amazing. There's no gaps. I've also drilled 4 holes in the belly plate because I will be mounting the drop tank in this one. Just a bit of glue all around the place. Ensure everything is glued to everything, which makes sense obviously, but it does pay to push everything down. And then you can go ahead, and I like to use Mr. Surfacer 500 and just fill any hairline cracks. Really, there's barely anything there. Good if I could get it in focus, of course. Come on, mate. I just go crazy with Mr. Surfacer, and you'll see this as a recurring theme, not because there's anything wrong with the model, it's just that I like to be extra cautious and put as much Mr. Surfacer on these sort of joins as I can, and I'll come back and clean those up later. Continuing on with the gluing, I'm just going to glue on the cowl section that's at the rear of the engine, or it covers over the instrument panel, if you like. So I've already glued those parts together, and they just snap fit straight on, which is pretty terrific. Also just use this opportunity to test fit the firewall gun mount detail. It does still fit on with the cowling glued, which is great, so quick bit of glue, and that part's attached for good. So let's get into some painting. First up, I want to paint the engine block and engine accessories. I'm going to use MRP's Night or Black for this. The Night colour is actually like a World War I camouflage colour, and it's not a black, it's like a super dark grey, and it's a fantastic engine colour. So all engine components that I can get my hands on, get a good coat of this, starting off with the supercharger and the intake there. All comes apart still, so I can get to everything. The engine block there, you can see in the frame there, it's not a black colour, it's like a super dark grey, much darker than German grey or RLM66. It's a great engine colour. It's all going to get weathered up anyway. Lots of detail on that part. And then while I'm airbrushing, I'm going to spray in the radiator areas with RLM02. Again, MRP colour, and this is just sort of background to make sure that you don't see any bare plastic when you look through the radiators. And with the radiators themselves, the surrounds all get coated in RLM02. Make sure there's good coverage and everything. It's all glued together, but I can paint the actual radiator faces themselves once all that's done. Now that's where these AK Real Colour paint pens come in. This is the perfect application for them. Just painting in the radiator faces with aluminium. Really easy. Honestly, this took about 30 seconds to do, and it beats brush painting them any day. And look at that, ready for weathering and ready to be installed in the model. Look, same goes for some of the engine components as well. So some of the fuel injection parts and various bits and pieces were aluminium or steel colour, and these AK pens are perfect for that. And it's just a matter of brushing them straight over the top of the MRP paint, and super helpful, super handy. And yeah, obviously, look, there's plenty that I do need to brush paint as well, but where I can, I use these AK Real Colour paint pens, and yeah, it's really handy. So all the piping and so on that's glued straight onto the engine bearers, where I can, use the paint pen. Not a paid advert, I paid for these myself. I'm not sponsored, but they're really handy things, and you can get quite close and quite nicely detailed paint jobs with them. And out with the gunmetal, start painting up some of the finer fuel injection parts. Again, the instructions call out this intricate paint pattern and paint schemes for stuff, which is all cool. It's all going to get weathered up anyway. Pro acrylic bronze, so they make really nice metallics. So I'll just, where I can, follow the instructions and use the colour call-outs. It's all going to get blurred together anyway once I start weathering, but it's good to start with the right colours to begin with. Just a nice fine brush. Back to the AK Black. For all the fittings, and some of the hosing was black, which is cool. Lots of what's the word I'm looking for? Like hose clamps were in black. So again, out with the black and make sure they're all painted in. Really hard to get on film is painting the hose clamp areas because it's so tiny. So you'll have to just bear with me. I'm not going to show that on film because it's almost impossible to capture. That looks really great painted in. And then we can start gluing in some of the parts, which is the fun bit. There, those hose clamps on the various fittings there. Now I'll use Tamiya orange cap just to give me a little bit more working time, and so as not to get glue everywhere as well. So I think if I used regular glue and brushed it in, I would just get brush marks all over everything, and that would be very uncool. Brush marks, I mean glue marks everywhere. Having said that, I'd mash that and don't get it in the right spot. Ah yes, quality modelling. Alright, there's the fuel injection rail. Actually no, they're the spark plug rail. What am I saying? Spark plug rail. And then we can glue in the air intake and the supercharger. Again, using Tamiya orange cap. This just clicks into place really neatly. Well, it doesn't look like it. I'm obviously fumbling around here, but it actually does fit in really, really well. Yeah, look at that. Fantastic. Time to glue some of these painted engine parts to the engine block assembly. That way I can weather them all in harmony and in unison and at the same time. So a bit of Tamiya orange cap. Again, I'm using it this time not so much for the strength of the bond, but more so that the glue doesn't run everywhere because it's quite viscous, which is good. And the liquid will also be strong. So the engine is quite a heavy component once it's all assembled, so it's probably good to have a bit of extra strength of the glue. So these engine bearers get glued on. Look at the detail. It's really, really great. I know I've got to stop gushing about how great the detail is in this kit, but it's pretty great. Anyway, they just get glued on. Make sure they're in the right spot. A little bit more orange cap. I'm going to glue on these. I think they're glycol tanks, coolant tanks maybe. I'm sure someone will tell me in the comments. They were carefully masked up and glued on, painted. And then out with the real colour pens again, just to capture a little bit extra detail. In this case, it's the trunking, coolant trunking there. And again, out with the AK Real Colour, sorry, AK 3rd Gen Black, painting in some of these boxes, electronics boxes and so on. While I'm at it, the more gluing, the forward cowling ring captures and holds the oil tank there, and just make sure that the gaps are all joined. So look, let's quickly apply some decals. Now these are Cartograph decals, so they go on the engine block and they are amazingly thin and they go on beautifully. So just the engine block numbers, 605, and the serial number on the side of the engine block as well. A bit hard to keep these straight. Come on mate, don't fight me. Now I am all over the place with this build. So look, there's the decals on, they look fantastic. I am all over the place with this build. I'm jumping backwards and forwards. So I need those decals to dry before I can start weathering. So I'll set them aside and I'll clean up some of the mister surface that I've applied. And then I'll glue on and I'll glue some of the detail in on the radiator. So this is the little support tabs. Again, sorry, jumping around like a all over the place like a dog's breakfast. These are the radiator sort of support tabs, or the radiator flap actuator tabs. A lot of words. And these can be glued in, along with the radiators themselves. And these are an amazing push fit, but obviously it'll do a little bit of glue, just to make sure they don't fall out, because you can rest assured they'd fall out at the wrong time. But they just pop straight in. And I'll mask all these up later on, so you can mask before you spray the rest of the aircraft, but I'm going to mask them at the end. Just a touch of glue on either side. Let's push down to make sure they fit perfectly, which they do. Amazing radiator detail in there too, that's fantastic. So continuing with the everything everywhere all at once nature of this video, let's jump into some weathering. So I want to kick off the weathering of the gun bay type area with Tamiya panel line wash, the dark grey one. So just going around all the detail, making sure that everything's nice and grimy and dirty, and then using a Q-tip or a cotton bud, going to remove a lot of that excess grime, excess panel line wash, and really just blend those edges in and just move it all around. Leave it in the nooks and crannies in the corners, and as the Q-tip or cotton bud gets dirtier, actually I mentioned in the last video, roll it around, and it just adds a bit of a dirtier look to stuff. And you can see there the panel line wash has settled really nicely in and around all the details. Same with the engine block, we can apply the panel line wash. There really is no super clever science to this. I just brush it around and hope for the best. And once you let it sort of touch dry, I guess it is dry, you can reactivate it with a Q-tip or a paintbrush and just blend it in and get rid of any sort of harsh edges and tide marks and the like. And that's what these enamel type products are really fantastic for. Just adding a really grimy look, and you can see I'm just slapping it on, not being careful or clever about it. You see, these are the MG brackets, the upper MG or cannon brackets for the nose cannons. Just cleaning it off, leaving a nice little bit of patina in around the detail. So again, side of the engine block, just removing the excess, if you like. And what does get left on the model really is just like a grimy film or dirty film, if you like. And look, I don't want to disparage any other YouTubers, but some other YouTubers have been saying that these engine blocks were really clean and so on, and that ain't true. So everything mechanical gets dirty and grubby, and end of the war, the German ground crew and engineers that maintain and service these things aren't polishing and cleaning engine blocks. I'll give you the tip. Anyway, that'll be a hill that I die on. Now, I painted the guns or the cannons with AK Extreme Metal colours, which is a lovely colour. As soon as I hit it with the panel line wash, it just stripped the paint off. So I repainted those with good old Tamiya LP Metallic Grey, which has a bit of a purple hue, a rich purple hue. But that's all right, we'll attend to that later. But it doesn't get eaten by the panel line wash, so it's a good colour after all. So a bit of black panel line wash in there, and then just buff it off with a Q-tip. It's a bit shiny and a bit sort of metallic-y looking now, but we'll fix that up later on. So jumping to the transparency part. So these are the wingtip lights. So of course I don't have any clear red, so that's awesome. And these are actually, they were red and green covers, bulb covers that sat inside a clear perspex case. So I know that's a lot of words, but it's okay to paint it flat red and flat green. That's fine. And that's what I do. So there's the flat red one done for the port side, and then we'll just go in with a bit of Tamiya flat green for the starboard side. Super scientific, and this just brush it in really quickly. I know Tamiya paint, an acrylic paint doesn't brush paint well, but it's perfect for these sort of situations. And there you go, there's your wingtip light lens covers. The wingtip lights can be set aside for the paint to dry, and you can go ahead and do some more cleanup because I'm jumping around. I apologise. I like to really make sure that any joins, any seams and that sort of stuff, it really completely cleaned up so that when you come to paint, there's no, nothing to catch you out. So I applied Mr. Surfacer where any panels or any parts join together, and I use the old chemical sanding method of AK real colour thinners, but you can use Mr. Surfacer or, Mr. Leveling Thinner or isopropyl alcohol to clean these up. And just remove any residue, and it just makes sure that there's no gaps, no seams, and using this sort of method with Mr. Surfacer and thinners, it does leave a panel line, and it is quite neat. So I'm taking a punt here and I'm gluing in the main gear legs pretty early on in construction. I mean late in construction, but early before paint. It's, I don't know, look, Airfix have done it this way, where there's a stub of the main gear that then glues to the rest of the main gear leg, and that's cool. I just was dreading the thought of having to clean this up once the model had been painted, so I'm gluing them in now. This might be risky, and I may end up breaking them off 55 times, but once glued, it's pretty solid, so I'm going to wing it, so to speak, and glue them in now. That means that with a good amount of glue, and just leave it overnight, come back the next day to clean it up. Make sure there's a nice sort of bead of molten glue, and we can attack them with a bit of sanding sponge. Sand carefully with a bit of sanding sponge just to get rid of that seam. So I'd hate to be doing this with the model painted and having to manhandle the model while doing it. So that was my rationale. There may be a cleverer way of doing it. I've seen some people pin and cut off and pin the undercarriage legs. The thought of that scares me. So I'm doing it this way. And look, polish up those seams, bit of old Scotch-Brite, just make sure there's nothing remaining, and then just a final touch-up, clean up with a little bit of liquid glue just to make sure, glass fibre pen, just liquid glue to make sure that seam is completely gone. It's possibly overkill, but I just like to blend everything once I've sanded it all and cleaned it all up with a little bit of liquid glue. It does look like a lot there, it's actually not. Then we can clean up the wheels as well. These are 2 halves. Same sort of process. Really nice job on the tyres, to be perfectly honest, on the wheels. Just a nice seam to remove, which is pretty simple. Just a bit of scraping and sanding. 400 grit God hand sponge. It's the MVP of this build, I think. Yeah, you probably don't need to watch me sanding and polishing up this too much. I won't go through both wheels. Anyway. And then just a quick polish up with the old sponge scourer or scouring pad, Scotch-Brite. You'd see it's ratty and stuff, but it's actually perfect for doing this sort of thing. And finally, just a little bit of liquid glue, just to make sure that we've captured those seams and it's got rid of any sanding dust and all that sort of stuff, and it's blended in nicely. Sound like a bit of a broken record, but these sort of little things work. You do them over and over again. That looks really good. One last area that needs a little bit of attention are the exhaust stubs. So these are handed, left and right, part H1 and H2. I'm going to use this little rechargeable display drill, hand drill, little electric drill. This is a fantastic tool. It's got quite slow speed, so you don't melt the plastic or send it off into orbit. But it's got plenty of torque, so you can sort of get stuck into the parts quite easily. So widening up the hole with the first bit, if you like, and using my knife blade just to scrape out the exhaust a little bit more, catch those corners, really just widening up the hole and making it a little bit, sort of the walls of the exhaust just a touch thinner. Airfix didn't do a bad job, but you can certainly be improved upon. And then the usual routine, just a little bit of liquid glue just to blend all that in and get rid of any of the swarf and the dust out of there. And then repeat 11 more times, and then you've got both sides ready to go. And I've mounted these on cocktail sticks. They'll be painted and weathered and then glued in down the line, probably towards the end of construction. So look, at this point I thought this would be the end of the build, for this part of the video anyway. I'm going to test fit the firewall. Now those guns aren't glued in yet, so they look a bit wavy gravy, but just making sure that things still fit in, which they do. I'm going to test fit the engine block as well, or the engine assembly. What's troubling me is those the wing root section that's mounted to the exhaust shrouds. I'm concerned about having to paint those separately. Hasn't got that quite glued in there, quite attached properly there. So look, after this test fit, I think I'm going to have to come up with a better way of gluing these in. Maybe not necessarily following the instructions. Look, it looks brilliant. And the nose cowling as well, the front forward section of cowling. It's a press fit. It's really great. And to test fit the spinner as well. Look at that. Looks amazing. But I think I'm going to have to deviate from the instructions somewhat. Oh, and actually I haven't fitted the glass yet, so maybe this isn't the end of the video. The canopies, the glass parts are incredibly thin and beautifully clear. So again, so I'm going to carry on how much of a great job that Airfix has done, but they really have done a great job. And they just fit straight in like that. That looks awesome. No armour plates fitted yet or anything like that. And there's the forward canopy section. Fit is amazing. So that's good fun. Airfix provide a masking set in the box. They did in my kit anyway. And I also, I think mine was a pre-order set, so it came with the additional masking set. So this is really great. It gives you the internal and the external masks, so you can paint the canopy frames in the inside and the outside, which is pretty handy. And it gives you a quite simple instruction sheet. And these are pre-cut. And look, there's been some chatter on the internet, as there always is, bloody internet, about these peeling. I haven't had them peel as yet, which is really great. So this is the pilot's forward armoured glass that goes on the inside of the front canopy. And these are just masked on, so you can, glued on so you can mask them up. You know what I'm saying. I just use a cotton bud or a Q-tip just to make sure that everything's adhered really well. Those corners are nice and flat. Same with the outside as well. And you can see the fit of those is fantastic, and they're not peeling at all. Granted, I've just applied them. I wouldn't expect them to peel, but I guess time will tell with that. And really, I'm applying these masks now so that I can paint the inside of the canopy, which I've gone and done. Some RLM 66 from MRP. You peel the masks off. And these masks are done by Cartograph as well, using the washi tape or Tamiya tape, if you like. And I'm just going to peel off the insides so I can fit the armour glass and then fit the canopy to the forward canopy to the model. So it kind of has to be done before paint, I reckon, just to make sure there's no gaps. And these peel off really nice, and you can see that they've worked perfectly with that grey of the inside of the canopy framing. Well done, Airfix. And then just a little bit of Tamiya orange cap. Whoop, not too much. There we go. And we can glue in the forward armoured glass. A little bit extra glue there, just make sure it's all in. There you go. And these can now be glued to the model itself. So the reason I'm gluing it now is because I want to make sure that panel line where the canopy section glues to the fuselage, there's no hairline cracks at all. Now it does look to the naked eye like it all fits perfectly, and generally that's the case. But I'm being a little bit overly cautious and just making sure. So I'll glue this in. Just a touch of Tamiya super thin, going quite gently, making sure that I don't get any glue on the mask area, because the glue will wick straight under the masks. And just make sure it fits, which it does. So again, out with the Mr. Surfacer 500. It's looking a bit funky, my Mr. Surfacer, so I might need to get a new bottle. This is getting pretty thick now. Look at that stringy mess. But anyway, it's kind of why I like it, because it's quite thick. But anyway, so just brush it on. Again, making sure there's no hairline cracks or gaps on this panel here. And then once it's dry, I usually leave it overnight just so it's really dry, otherwise you end up removing too much Mr. Surfacer. Just a cotton bud or Q-tip dipped in AK Real Colour thinners, and just polish that excess putty away. Takes a couple of seconds to reactivate it, but leaves a lovely smooth surface, and the thinners doesn't affect the plastic at all, which is really cool. So look at that. Bit messy looking, but yeah, got some on the canopy. Good job, Dwyer. That's alright. Once that's all cleaned up, I can move to masking up the driver's hole, or masking up the cockpit section there. Just using some, so this is Gun's high-tack tape, orange tape, which is really good stuff. Just making sure that it's all sealed up, because I don't want any dust bunnies in there or anything like that. So make sure this section's all really well sealed. Bit of a dilemma in regards to these the exhaust shrouds and the wing root section, I think I'm going to have to glue them in like this so that I can get the join and the seam right, and just glue the engine in later on. Really loath to glue the engine in this early, or motor in this early before paint. I don't want to mask over those decals. I don't want to mask over all of it. I'll end up damaging the paint job. So with it just the engine just dry fit in place, I'm going to glue those wing root panels in. So it's a bit dicey. Don't want to get any glue on the painted area, but also we want to make sure these wing root panels fit perfectly. So you can see there's a tiny gap. Just use the tweezers to smush it into place. Come on, mate. There you go. Yeah, this is important to get this right. So I'd hate to be having to do this once it was painted, which is how Airfix tell you to do it. So glue them in now and just take the risk that the engine will be able to be removable and then can be refitted later on after the paint has been done to the fuselage and wings. A bit dicey, but worth a shot. So engine removed, let's get to some final masking. Again with the various tapes, starting off with the Gunz high-tack tape, covering over the shell ejection ports and the lower fuselage. Pretty simple job, there you go. Again, more of this orange tape. This is really good stuff. It tends not to pull the paint up, which is handy, but I'm also applying it to mostly non-painted areas. We've all seen masking before. It's pretty simple process, but it's important to, I tend to over mask because I hate paint getting into areas and more importantly dust blowing into the insides of canopies. Thankfully I can get to it on this model, but I'm just making sure by over masking. Yep. Why did I film that bit? Anyway, just that open section there blows straight into the cockpit, so I really want to make sure that's well masked up. Lots of tape, lots of small sections of tape. Now this tape here is AK, sorry no, don't say AK, it's ammo low tack tape. So I'm using this to mask over the painted exhaust shrouds. Now I can always repaint these, it's no problem if it does pull the paint, but there's no point in tempting fate. So I'm just going to use the purple tape, which is really good stuff. It's low tack. You actually mask over decals with this, but I'm not going to this time. Just make sure everything's wrapped up nicely. And a bit of final masking. I use offcuts of foam that comes in res kit, various resin stuff kits, but I particularly like the res kit foam. And I just stuff all of the radiators, make sure it's all covered in. It's really handy to do. Same with the wheel wells. Again, just random offcuts and bits and pieces. And once this is all masked up, which it nearly is, I can get to paint. So that will actually be in our next episode. So as I wind up this one, I'll just get the last of the masking done. Wheel wells. And look, thank you for sticking with me this far. It's been a bit of a hodgepodge of an episode, just tying up all the loose ends before we get to paint. So 48 minutes in, and 38 minutes in, and we're done. So look, thank you for sticking around this far. Please like and subscribe, chuck some comments below, and I'll see you in the next episode.